Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. Hurricane Irma has begun its deadly assault, unleashing devastation in the Caribbean islands, where it's already claimed at least 10 lives. Now, we've just gotten word that Israel's foreign ministry has lost complete contact with 4 Israeli citizens who were there when the storm hit. Already the most enduring Category 5 on record, Hurricane Irma is the largest storm ever seen in the Atlantic. The blackout of contact with these 4 Israelis is a major cause for concern, with officials reporting disastrous flooding and injuries throughout the Caribbean. Irma has left 2/3 of homes in Puerto Rico without power and is about to hit Haiti, where nearly 3 million people are expected to be affected by the deadly storm. But the worst damage of all may come when the storm hits South Florida this weekend. Florida Governor Rick Scott has issued a mandatory evacuation of several coastal cities, and President Trump has announced a state of emergency in the state. So if you're one of the people in Irma's path, this isn't a time to take any chances. Well, Israel has just launched a massive airstrike against a weapons plant in Syria, one that's believed to be developing deadly chemical weapons for the Syrian army. The attack came as a complete shock to Syria and Lebanon, who have now confirmed 2 Syrians were killed by the Israeli air assault. This comes nearly 24 hours after the UN's report that the Syrian president's forces used deadly sarin gas attacks at least 20 times over the last 4 years.
In several instances, government forces used chemical weapons against civilians in opposition-held areas, including Khan Sheikhoun, Idlib, on 4th April. We gather extensive evidence, including 43 interviews with victims, eyewitness, first responders, medical staff, and persons who visit the site, as well as photos of remnants and satellite imagery. On the basis of this information, we concluded that the chemical attack was carried out by a Syrian Su-22 aircraft, which dropped 3 conventional bombs and sarin bomb in Khan Sheikhoun. The sarin attack killed over 80 individuals, most of them women and children, and injured hundreds of others.
Israel has been known to make strategic air attacks on Syrian targets, but only in isolated cases and when absolutely necessary. Above all else, the IDF is especially concerned with preventing Iranian and Hezbollah influence in the area, which has escalated in recent years as Syria continues to grow increasingly unstable. This overnight sneak attack in Syrian territory, however, potentially marks a huge turning point in Israel's military strategy. It demonstrates that Israel can not only successfully carry out airstrikes even with Russian defenses in place, but also indicates that Israel may be taking a stand in a war that it's mostly stayed out of until now. It's looking more likely that this may be because Hezbollah was gearing up to take over the weapons plant from Syria. While the IDF doesn't comment on military operations like this, army officials have strongly hinted that the attack came to prevent Hezbollah from obtaining cutting-edge and legal weapons being developed at the site. On top of the 6-year-long civil war gripping Syria, the region is also faced with ongoing military conflicts with the Islamic State. The Syrian army has just had a major breakthrough on that front by breaking a 28-month-long siege by ISIS of the city of Deir al-Azor. The Islamic State has laid horrific siege to the city for over 2 years, cutting off food and water to the civilians trapped inside. There's been little hope for the city until now, after 840 days, when the Syrian army finally drove the Islamic State soldiers from the city's gates. This is seen as a major victory for Assad's army and marks a turning point in the war to free the region from jihadist extremism. While Israel is facing a growing crisis along its northern borders, the instability in Syria has opened the gates for Iranian and Hezbollah footholds in the region, placing devastating advanced rockets within striking distance of Israeli territory. The mounting presence of Iran and Hezbollah along the northern border has been difficult to ignore. Just weeks ago, Israel confirmed the construction of at least 2 Iranian missile factories in Lebanon, news that the Lebanese prime minister rejected as Israeli disinformation. And yet Iran's new defense minister has just announced Iran's plans to export even more rockets in the immediate future, all in an effort to boost the weapons cache of its neighboring allies. Hezbollah may be the biggest ally of all for Iran in the region, with a formidable army right at Israel's doorstep. Although the United States has placed new sanctions on Iran to deter its nuclear development, the Trump administration ignored a critical opportunity during the Syrian ceasefire negotiations to prevent further Iranian takehold in the area. The Israeli government even came out against setting up safe zones in Syria, fearing Iran would slip through the cracks, fears which have clearly materialized. And lately, Israel has seen more and more advanced weaponry finding its way into the hands of Hezbollah fighters, which means that unfortunately the relative calm of the last 10 years may not last much longer. Well, things have been getting more and more tense on the border of Israel and Lebanon over the last few months, and now the IDF has just launched a massive military drill to prepare for the next possible war with Hezbollah. It's the largest of its kind in decades. The drill is already underway and scheduled to last 2 weeks, bringing thousands of soldiers from multiple IDF branches together. Thousands of reservists were even called in to participate, with Air Force, Navy, intelligence, infantry, and cyber units all coming together for the operation. The drill is said to simulate a possible war scenario in which the army would need to evacuate Israeli civilians along the border, an unprecedented undertaking considering nearly 1 million Israelis live in the north right now. Since its last war with Israel over 10 years ago, Hezbollah has been consolidating its army and upgrading its weapons arsenal. Right now, the terror group is believed to hold over 100,000 rockets capable of reaching Israeli soil. And recently, the group has threatened to bring the next war directly to Israel's civilian areas. However, top IDF officials still say that they don't see a war with Hezbollah immediately on the horizon. They've seen the terror group struggling with internal conflicts, an economic crisis, and a leadership vacuum. And last year, a top Hezbollah commander was assassinated in Syria, creating a power shift that continues to derail Hezbollah's ability to organize. On top of rumors of infighting within Hezbollah ranks, their military abilities may be weakened considering many of their troops are spread all over the Middle East in an ongoing war with the Islamic State. But regardless of the terror group's plans, clearly Israel isn't taking any chances. Israel has just received an unprecedented offer from the leader of Hamas after spending 22 months in an Israeli prison. Top Hamas official Hassan Youssef is now saying the terror group is prepared to lay down its weapons in a ceasefire deal if, of course, Israel lifts its blockade of Gaza. With us to explain is ILTV's Brett Allen-Smith. Now, Brett, is this an offer Israel can trust? I mean, how realistic is this?
Thanks, Dasha. Well, this is definitely a surprising offer, but there's a lot to consider first before Israel can really take anything seriously. So first of all, Hamas is in a very difficult place right now. I mean, things are just falling apart in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority has been hitting them with sanction after sanction, and with fewer and fewer allies in the region, they could really be running out of options at this point. Now, this offer is coming just after the head of UN's Middle East visit, which included a tour of Gaza, at the end of which he called on Israel, Egypt, and the PA to lift their sanctions and fix the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So the timing can't just be coincidence on this one.
And what is Hamas saying they'll offer in return?
Well, according to Hassan Youssef, they're prepared to offer a long-term ceasefire deal with Israel in exchange for Israel more or less completely lifting the Gaza blockade. Now, that would mean total freedom of movement in and out of the Strip. That's imports and exports, just everything. And obviously, all Israelis are not too thrilled with terms like that, even if Hamas does stick to their promise of upholding a ceasefire, as it opens up a lot of security concerns. Now, let's go ahead and check out the report.
The head of Hamas has just come forward with a surprising offer. Hassan Youssef has been the terror group's leader and co-founder since 2005, after serving as the visible leader of the Second Intifada. Even still, Youssef is considered to be among the more conservative of Hamas's leaders, despite the fact that he just served over a year and a half in an Israeli jail for inciting violence against Israel. But this latest offer is certainly a surprising one, and comes less than a week after Youssef was freed from prison. The Hamas leader has just announced that Hamas is prepared to enter a long-term ceasefire deal with Israel on the condition that all blockades of Gaza be completely lifted. With conditions in the Strip getting worse and worse, especially over the last few months, many speculate that this may be an offer seriously worth considering. In a private interview with Israeli media, Youssef promised that Hamas would honor the terms of a ceasefire if the blockade was dropped, citing that as per their agreement, Hamas hadn't fired a single rocket into Israel since the end of 2014's Operation Protective Edge. Though Hamas may be in a tight spot, many Israelis see the lifting of the Gaza blockade as something that would only strengthen Hamas as a threat, opening the floodgates for weapons into, and armed terrorists out of, the Strip. Regardless, the fact that Hamas's leader is willing to even make the offer in the first place certainly could mean that they're hoping for some kind of change and may be willing to put their money where their mouth is.
Reports are now coming in that the Prime Minister's wife, Sarah, is about to be indicted in the coming weeks. That means Sarah Netanyahu will stand trial, charged with misusing over $100,000 of government money for her own private housekeeping. These are rumors that many have been whispering for weeks, but now it's looking like Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit will be issuing the court indictment within the coming weeks. The charges include Sarah Netanyahu's alleged hiring of an electrician who turned out to be a member of her husband's own Likud party, as well as several counts of falsifying documents, lying about her expenses, and breach of trust. The Prime Minister's wife has denied any wrongdoing in the matters and took a private lie detector test just a few days ago, hoping to prove her side of the story. Lie detector results aren't admissible in Israeli courts, but clearly the Prime Minister's wife is hoping to show that she has nothing to hide. All in all, Sarah Netanyahu is suspected of misusing 400,000 shekels, close to $112,000 of government money. The UN General Assembly is set to convene in just 2 weeks, and rumors are swirling that President Trump will be taking the opportunity to reboot Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. ILTV's Aaron Porras is here to tell us more. So, Aaron, where are things with the negotiations now?
Well, we've seen a lot of effort recently from the Trump administration to restart peace talks. Things fell apart back in 2014, and ever since then, with the exception of security coordination, there has been pretty much no advancement in peace negotiations whatsoever. Especially, and things didn't really get any better with all the skepticism that was following Jared Kushner's visit as envoy to the Middle East, especially since the White House had not officially recognized a two-state ideology, nor condemned settlement construction. So it's really just, right now we're really just waiting on them to come together. Luckily, Kushner did grease the wheels at least a little bit because they're willing to meet with President Trump at the UN.
Trump is going to be speaking with them one-on-one at the UN General Assembly. Now, is it too much to hope that these talks could really go somewhere right now?
I mean, it's not too much to hope, but at the same time, it really just depends on whether or not the two sides are willing to come down and sit down and talk. This is not the first time that that a president of the United States has come forward with a peace plan. Trump will not be the first. Unfortunately, the way things are going, probably not the last. But again, if he's there, the infrastructure to set the peace talk is there. He's going to be meeting with them at the UN. And if Israel and Palestine can come up with something that they can agree on and are open, then something could come out of this, sure.
All right, well, let's check out the details of your report.
The American president will meet privately before the assembly with both Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Abbas, his first talks with them since May. The White House is hopeful about its latest push for peace following the envoy led by Jared Kushner to the region a few weeks ago. While a formal peace plan still needs to be drawn up, which could happen by the end of the year, Kushner's team returned from their Middle East tour feeling encouraged. That's because they were apparently able to sway the Palestinians to remain involved with the talks and coordinated with both Jordan and Saudi Arabia to convince President Abbas that Trump was taking the peace talks seriously. Indeed, Trump campaigned on his promise to land the, quote, ultimate deal between Israel and the Palestinians and visited the region personally last May to meet with leaders from both sides. Now it looks like he'll be having more one-on-ones both before and after the United Nations convenes its General Assembly later this month. This will be President Trump's first meeting with Netanyahu and Abbas since the progress made by Kushner's peace envoy, so we'll just have to wait and see if the ultimate deal is truly on the way.
Japanese officials have just confirmed that North Korea has carried out a massive nuclear test, detonating a warhead 10 times more powerful than any bomb in their arsenal until now. The rise of North Korea as a nuclear power has devastating implications for the world and potentially places Israel in the crosshairs of warheads from two enemies.
系と異なる可能性のある地震波の観測と、これまでの情報を総合的に勘案した結果、本日北朝鮮が核実験を実施したものと判断されます。
This comes just after North Korea's claim that the country had successfully developed a hydrogen bomb, which, from the looks of this latest test, may very well be the case. H-bombs are considered to be the most powerful nuclear weapon on Earth, a significant step up from the A-bombs North Korea has tested in the past. Clearly, the country is stepping up its nuclear program at a terrifying rate, especially after weeks of escalating tensions with the United States. After North Korea threatened to nuke Guam, President Trump promised a retaliation of, quote, fire and fury worse than the world had ever seen before. Many see North Korea's ramped up aggression and weapons development as its most powerful bargaining chip in negotiating with the U.S. and the rest of the world. This is the exact dilemma Israel fears facing with Iran, a country with its own hopes of becoming a nuclear power, one which may be taking notes from North Korea even as we speak. Lately, Iran has been repeating threats to withdraw from the pre-agreed nuclear deal with the U.S., maybe taking cues from North Korea, which seems to be moving full steam ahead with impunity. With the devastating aftermath of Hurricane Harvey still unloading on people all over the Gulf Coast, Floridians are now bracing themselves for Hurricane Irma, which is supposed to be the most powerful Atlantic storm ever on record. Well, now the Israeli embassy has just pitched in to help, sending several tons of aid to help victims in Houston and Louisiana who lost their homes. Israel has been on the ground in Houston since the storm unleashed its deadly force all over the coast. And just yesterday, the Israeli government revealed a $1 million aid package to help the ravaged Jewish community get back on its feet. And now this latest aid package is coming straight from the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., partnering up with Israel and an American-Israeli moving company called Movers 495. It's all in a move to coordinate tons of aid packages to victims of Hurricane Harvey. A message on the aid boxes read, Israel stands with Texas. The Category 5 Hurricane Irma is officially the most powerful storm ever recorded in the Atlantic. And unfortunately, it's heading straight for South Florida. The governor of Florida has already announced a state of emergency with millions of Floridians preparing to evacuate.
Do not sit and wait to prepare. Get prepared now. Yesterday, I declared a state of emergency in all 67 Florida counties to help emergency management officials across the state work together more easily and to ensure that they have all the resources they need to prepare our communities. This morning, I requested President Trump declare a pre-landfill emergency for the entire state of Florida. I just heard from the White House, and I have been told that President Trump has approved this declaration. This will free up much needed federal funding and assistance as we prepare for Irma. As of 5 o'clock today, I waived all tolls in the state, which will help our evacuation efforts.
South Florida residents are pretty used to hurricanes by now and typically ride out the storms inside of their homes. But even seasoned Floridians are worried that Irma might be a beast of a totally different nature. Israel's foreign ministry has even warned Israeli citizens in Florida to evacuate and clear out the storm's path immediately. Clearly, this isn't a time to take any chances. The Trump administration has just made a controversial decision to end a program that protects nearly 1 million immigrant dreamers. They were brought to America as children, and Jewish groups all over the United States are denouncing the move. They see dreamers the same way that they see their own Jewish relatives who sought refuge in America as immigrants themselves. The program, known as the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, has protected nearly 800,000 young immigrants from deportation by giving them the ability to work legally in the U.S. in the form of 2-year renewable work permits. It's also helped them obtain driver's license and enroll in college. And through DACA, these dreamers have been able to find the hope that they might someday be able to legally immigrate to the United States, the country they've lived in for the majority of their lives. Applicants had to pass a series of vigorous government background checks to be eligible, but now the Trump administration has decided to do away with the project altogether.
To have a lawful system of immigration that serves the national interest, we cannot admit everyone who would like to come here. It's just that simple. There is an open, that would be an open borders policy, and the American people have rightly rejected that.
Congress will now have 6 months to undo the program, putting the fate of nearly 1 million dreamers into very unknown territory. Protesters have just broken out in full force all over the country, including Jewish American groups from across the spectrum. The American Jewish Committee, the Jewish Community Council of Greater Washington, and the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism have all blasted the decision, and Jewish leaders and rabbis have called President Trump's decision morally misguided and poor public policy. The demise of DACA comes on the heels of another controversial White House decision to limit or possibly cancel entirely the J-1 visas to the U.S. This would block thousands of Israelis from being able to study in the United States or work in Jewish summer camps. Now, you've probably never heard of the tree man syndrome disease, and that's because there's only ever been one case of it in history. Now, for years, a Palestinian man living in Gaza known as the tree man has been seeking a cure for his horrific disease, and it looks like Israeli doctors have just found that cure. Mohamed Talouli is 42 years old and is currently the only known case of the rare disease in history. These large growths you're seeing on his hand are the result of complications from the human papillomavirus, a condition that is often cancerous but never quite like this before. Dubbed the tree man, Talouli has been frantically searching for medical treatments for years, first in Gaza, then in Egypt and the West Bank, but doctors were completely stumped by the bizarre growths, unable to find even casual mention of a similar condition in medical books. Well, finally, in a treatment coordinated with a Palestinian authority, Talouli has just been operated on by Israeli doctors in Jerusalem's Hadassah Medical Center. And it looks like the procedure was an astounding success. For the first time in years, Talouli can finally move his hand freely again and is now receiving further Israeli meds to finish off the disease for good. Israeli doctors had literally zero precedent to go on, but they've just cured one of the rarest diseases on the planet. Have you ever craved the creamy goodness of a potato with the pungent purpley pop of a beet? Well, Israeli scientists have just engineered beet pigments into all kinds of vegetables, and they're a lot more than just tasty. These purple veggies could save lives. Scientists at Israel's Weizmann Institute have been studying betalains, the pigment that makes beets red or yellow, for years. That's because betalains are actually incredibly rare in nature, and it turns out also insanely healthy. They're why beets are so high in antioxidants and even resistant to certain strains of mold and fungus. An Israeli team just uncovered the mystery behind the betaline-causing gene, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the purple flower of beets has finally been harnessed. Researchers have just genetically engineered all kinds of vegetables and infused them with the pigment from beets, resulting in super-powered and super purple new veggies. Purple potatoes, purple tomatoes, and eggplants that are even more purple than they were before, the new superfruits contain 60% more antioxidants and 90% more resistant to mold. This breakthrough has all kinds of exciting implications, not just for my salad, but for agriculture and economies all over the world. When harvested, these new foods will grow healthier, potentially yield higher crops, and last longer in grocery stores and refrigerators. Scientists have even experimented with infusing the pigment into flowers, resulting in healthier and more purple bouquets. Hopefully, I won't have to wait any longer until I can get my hands on a tasty veggie myself. Now, one man has continued to steal the internet's breath away after he, stole a whole bunch of personal property. That's right, I'm talking about Jason Meeks, the world's hottest felon, whose stunning good looks have taken him from behind bars to straight in front of the camera. Well, it looks like Israel's own supermodel Bar Raffaeli hasn't learned the lesson to stay away from so-called bad guys, because she's teaming up with him here in Israel, so brace yourselves, you're about to get a whole lot of sexy. Those chilled blue eyes, that calm yet somehow stern face. Nope, this isn't the latest Levi's ad. This is a prison mugshot of Jeremy Meeks, which went viral a few years ago for, obvious reasons, and landed him a modeling career while he was still behind bars. Better known as the hot felon, Meeks served his 2-year sentence for a felony weapons charge, and less than a year later made his runway debut on the catwalk at New York Fashion Week. Now it looks like he's about to be heading to Israel because Meeks has just been selected as the new face of Carolina Lemke Glasses, partnering up with Israeli super babe Bar Raffaeli. Caroline Lemke is based in Europe, but the majority of its stores are right here in Israel. Rafaeli herself actually owns about 5% of the company. But now that she's about to strike a pose with the world's hottest felon, well, let's just say it's nice to see the rehabilitation system is working for a change. That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.